Hey, welcome to The Explainer. This is where we take really complex topics and try to make sense of them by going straight to the sources.
All right, today we are jumping headfirst into what might be one of the most heated, most passionate debates inside Christianity. It's a debate that gets fired up by what we see in the headlines and what we read in ancient texts. So the big question is this: is the modern nation of Israel actually fulfilling ancient prophecy? Are we watching a prophetic countdown clock tick down in real time? Or has Israel's role already been fulfilled just in a way that maybe most people aren't expecting? We're going to dig into both sides of this. It's fascinating.
Okay, so let's start with the first major viewpoint. You might have heard it called dispensationalism. Basically, this is the belief that what's happening right now, today's events in and around Israel, are a direct, one-to-one fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And if that's true, it means the end of the age could be really, really close. So, people who hold this view, they'll tell you that what we're seeing today is something that hasn't happened in almost 2,000 years. You've got all these specific ancient prophecies, and they're not just happening randomly, they're all converging at the same time. It's not just one thing here or there, it's the fact that several key things are happening together and in a specific order that makes them say, whoa, this moment is completely unique in all of history. And for this viewpoint, the sequence is absolutely everything. I mean, they look at these four distinct prophecies, right, written by different people centuries apart, and they say they're unfolding today, right now, in the exact order they believe the Bible laid out. So they'll point to things like the Temple Institute over in Jerusalem, which is already rebuilding the sacred vessels and training priests for a new temple. And then you have political deals, like the Abraham Accords, and they see that as laying the groundwork for what the book of Daniel calls the covenant with many.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting, because this is where ancient prophecy smashes right into modern geopolitics. The prophet Ezekiel, way back when, described a future invasion of Israel, led by a very specific group of nations. And this viewpoint says, hey, we can identify those ancient names with modern countries. So when they see, for example, Russia and Iran signing a strategic partnership deal set for 2025, they don't just see a political alliance. They see hard evidence. They see the exact coalition that Ezekiel described falling into place right before our eyes.
And that sense of urgency, it's captured perfectly in this quote from the head of the Temple Institute. Synchronize your watches, it is time to build. I mean, the belief here is that everything is ready. They've got the priests, they've got the vessels, they've even got the red heifers needed for the purification ceremony. The only thing missing, they say, is the actual spot on the Temple Mount. All right, so let's hit pause on that and pivot, because there is a completely different way of looking at all of this. It's a view that's usually rooted in what's called covenant theology. And honestly, it paints a totally different picture. It argues that if you want to understand prophecy, you shouldn't be looking at the news headlines. You should be looking at Jesus and the creation of the church. See, this perspective draws a really sharp, clear line between two things: the biblical ethnic nation of Israel from the Old Testament and the modern secular state of Israel that was founded in 1948. And for people who hold this view, confusing those two things, treating them as if they're the same, that's the number one mistake you can make when you're trying to interpret prophecy. So this really lays out that key difference, right? The argument here goes something like this. Look, the modern state of Israel is a real, legitimate nation. No one's denying that. But its creation back in 1948, that was a political event driven by a UN resolution. It wasn't, they argue, a prophetic event. And because of that, you can't just automatically assume that it inherits all the specific covenant promises God made to the biblical nation of Israel. And proponents of this view will often point you right here to this verse from the book of Joshua as kind of their exhibit A. I mean, it says right there in the Old Testament, "So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Everyone was fulfilled." So they read that and they say, see, the Bible itself says the land promises were already kept, way back under Joshua. The argument then is that there are no outstanding land promises left for a modern state to fulfill. This is where, according to this viewpoint, the New Testament just completely changes the game. It radically redefines what it means to be part of God's people. It's not about your DNA or your ethnic backgrounds anymore, it's about a spiritual reality. I mean, they'll point you to passages like in Romans, where Paul talks about a circumcision of the heart, not of the flesh, or in Galatians, where he says that all believers in Jesus are the true seed of Abraham. So in the end, they see the Israel of God as this new international family made up of both Jews and Gentiles who have faith in Jesus. And all of this, it really brings us to one single verse, a verse in the book of Romans that has become the absolute theological epicenter of this entire debate. Seriously, how you understand this one little phrase will pretty much determine which side of this argument you fall on. Okay, so the official fancy term for this idea that the church has taken up Israel's role is supersessionism. You've probably heard it called replacement theology. Now, that's a really loaded term, and a lot of people who hold this view don't like it. They'd rather call it fulfillment theology. But whatever you call it, the core idea is the same, that the church is now the main vehicle for God's covenant plan on earth. So here's the verse the Apostle Paul is writing, and he says that a partial hardening has come upon Israel, but only until the full number of non-Jews, the Gentiles, has come to faith. And then he drops this line, and in this way, all Israel will be saved. And that is the multi-million-dollar question that fuels this entire debate. Who exactly is all Israel? And you really couldn't get two more different answers. Interpretation number one says this is a clear promise of a future event, a huge national mass conversion of ethnic Jewish people to faith in Jesus right before he returns. But interpretation number two, it says all Israel doesn't mean a nation at all. It means the complete number of all believers, Jew and Gentile, from all of history, who together make up the one truth family of God. So you might be wondering, why does this get so heated? Why do people care so much? Well, because it's not really about politics or trying to predict the future with newspaper clippings. When you get right down to it, this whole debate is about something much bigger, the very character of God and whether or not he is faithful to his promises. And what's so wild is that both sides are actually starting from the exact same place. Both want to defend the idea that God is faithful and keeps his promises. The first group says, look, if God made specific, unconditional promises to national Israel and doesn't keep them literally, then how can we trust any of his other promises? But the second group comes back and says, no, God's faithfulness is proven because he kept every single promise, but he did it in a bigger, better, more spiritual way through Jesus, for everyone who believes. And this brings us to this one last verse, just a few lines down from that all Israel phrase, and it's kind of the final battleground. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. One side reads that and says, see, God's specific calling on the nation of Israel can never be taken back. But the other side reads the exact same verse and says, this is talking about the gift of salvation through the gospel. That's the gift and calling that's irrevocable, and it's for everyone, Jew and Gentile alike. So in the end, you see, this isn't just a question about a nation in the Middle East. It forces us to ask a much bigger, much more personal question. How does God keep his promises? And the way you answer that, well, that shapes everything. It shapes how you read your Bible, how you watch the nightly news, and at the end of the day, it even shapes how you understand salvation itself.